But yeah, so even talking about mental health problem, if that's a way to direct our attention to these massive systemic issues that come from people's deprivation from resources, that's awesome. That's the conversation we should have. If it's a way of distracting us from the fact that like you have to reform the political system or where this stuff is just necessarily going to happen, then they're not any different than the fucking thoughts and prayers people.
And welcome to Tyler Is Groce, a podcast where a comedian talks to his successful comedy friends about life and self-improvement so that I can learn how to beat them at their own game and just be generally better than them. Because I know they think they're so great, and they are, but I know I can be better than them. So I'm trying to learn how by talking about stuff. Today we got a great one. We got Jered McCorkle. My boy, he was already on one episode. You should check it out. It was about Roe v. Wade. It was right after that happened. He's kind of my topical correspondent. I go to him when I want to talk about something topical, something that's not necessarily getting deep into the what are you doing, what are you up to, how are we improving ourselves, but more about what the fuck is going on in this world. And that's what Jered is. It's been an exciting time for me. I've been doing okay. I went to Barcelona. In my last video, I started off with me in Barcelona. And I was all sick and gross, and then now I'm back. Barcelona was great. It's good to be back, man. So what I do is I'll cut up clips for these podcast episodes, and I'll put them out, and I'll put them out on YouTube and stuff. And normally when you put out a clip, I put out a short, minute-long clip of a thing on YouTube. It gets a good amount, hundreds or maybe it might break 1,000 views, which is great. And usually just maybe a like or two, no one comments, but I posted a clip from the Live episode, the Opal Lily episode, where it's like first time at a strip club. Check that one out too. And man, I got comments and people hated it. Oh my God, they hated that clip. Just a bunch of because it was the clip was Liv explaining how you go to when you work at a strip club, a lot of guys come in, they're entitled, they think they can just kind of squeeze a boob if they want, and it's like no, there's rules here. Even though you paid, there's rules here. And these motherfuckers could not help themselves. They get on and they're like, it's called getting the service that you paid for, and I'm like, yeah, it is. And then I was like, let me comment back and just try to have a dialogue. And then there was like a bunch of them. And then I was like, well, I can't be the bitch that's going on every single comment. Like, actually, sir, what I think they meant was. So I just let it go. But man, they did not like that. You go look at that. I have a podcast clips tab in the YouTube channel as well. And if you're listening, go on YouTube, check some of the stuff out. But that's not what today is. Today is talking about guns with Jered McCorkle and the aftermath of all the terrible shootings that have been going on recently and for years. Jered was like, Jered actually likes guns. He was in the military. He grew up with guns, and he has some nuanced views on guns and what the system's doing to help or hurt or prevent or sustain these sort of gun deaths. And we get into it. He has a podcast of his own, the Comic Canon Revival. It's a comic book podcast, not political at all. But when he's on here, he's getting political. So let's just go ahead and get into it. Thank you so much for listening. I'm up to 31 subscribers, y'all. Oh my God. What a meteoric rise. Had 26 when I first put out this. 31. Thank you so much for listening, sincerely. And, for the algorithm, please do me like it, subscribe it, leave a comment. I'm going to have a thing at the bottom, a pinned comment, because these are all things that you're supposed to do when you're creating content. I'm going to have a pinned comment. Just go comment and just say anything you want. Just go call me a bitch. Just be like, Tyler, you're a bitch. Send. Because the algorithm doesn't care. And if you're like, that's too aggressive, just say, love you, bitch. Just put something in there so the algorithm likes me. Like it. Subscribe. And just more so just enjoy. I appreciate any ears that I get. And I've gotten good feedback. And thank you for the feedback. And yeah, enjoy this episode about guns with Jered McCorkle.
Oh, did I do the creepy voice? Yeah. Yeah.
We are going to start recording now.
Okay, recording in progress. And then you have to say, creepy. Got it.
You don't have
like
to click, got it. You don't got it.
But I'm saying it's a very sarcastic thing. But anyway, you're like, I know you're one of these kinds of people I'm very familiar with because I don't know, like the object of that, which is like, you're like a collector of like weird people.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, I know, because I'm a person that gets collected.
So you have multiple people that you know that will be like, "Hey, you're my friend now," and you often have like one-on-one relationships with people who like you because you're weird.
Not in a sustained sense, but that's why we started being friends.
Okay,
because I was like a novelty of some sort.
Right. I'm not. I've never been a group guy. I've always had individual relationships with people that mean something to me. Sorry. Did you see how sentimental I got just there?
Yeah,
now you can't handle it.
No. When I was in the Army, I was a conscientious objector for a while, and
so gay.
I know it is. It's gayer than actually being gay. But I made a really good
It's just
friend.
so funny that it's like what you and Muhammad Ali.
yeah. Man, actually, I met like a bunch of people in the Army that were. But
why would not? Okay, finish your sentence and then answer.
Yeah, I was just going to say, not everyone because I became this weird like pariah in the military, but because I was like legally protected, and not just that, like they, I think my first sergeant in our company was even like, nobody fuck up McCorkle or whatever. So like I was in the headquarters unit, which is where they put the misfits and shit like that. And I had this medic buddy who became friends with me because he thought it was just fucking weird that I would ever do something like that.
Why? How can you? What are the rules with that? And why were you able to do it? And why is that okay?
That's a good question. Like depends on what you mean by being able to do it. Like I wasn't able to do it, but I went through the process because anybody can. It's sort of like how you can sue anybody, right? That doesn't mean you have standing or you'll win your case or the case has merit. So I put it, in other words, you can put it in a 4187 to declare your conscientious objection, and then you get investigated, and then they make a ruling. I mean, it's a long, complicated process or whatever.
But how do they prove that you're actually conscientious or whatever?
So they do interviews and investigation.
Huh.
So like they talked to like a shit ton of my friends, all my family.
So they could talk to your friends and family, and they're like, Jered, no, he just a pussy.
Yeah. I mean,
he's actually a big old pussy, man. Don't believe him.
It puts them in a weird boat because they want to be supportive, right? But the thing they have to tell you or say about you to go along with what you're doing is like, yeah, he's always been just fucking coward, just
that's not
big
fair.
Old coward.
That's not fair, because if you're out in the fields, right, and you're like, I'm fighting for you have a gun, I'm fighting for my country, and then you shoot a kid because your sergeant's like, kill him. Kill the kid. The kid's just gonna grow up to be the Viet Cong, and then
it happens all the time. We're not even in Vietnam.
And then the Viet Cong are just in Afghanistan.
We don't want them to come back. Yeah, this is the last place we want those fuckers.
And then you kill him, and then you're like, "Fuck, this isn't right. I just killed a kid." And you're like, I now consciously object. They can go back to who you were pre-kid killing and be like, nah, man, he was always lazy. I would want him to move the hay, and he would say no and feed the pigeons. And he's probably just trying to feed the pigeons again. And
so basically, the idea is like conscientious objection means that you're a pacifist, right? So you can't. The reason I didn't get it in the end, even though it was like a long ass, like I can't remember.
Oh, you
like
didn't get it. You were in limbo, but you didn't get it.
Right. Because I didn't know that. I thought you could just be kind of against it on moral grounds, but you have to be against war. You can't be against this war. And I really tried to nuance that. Because
that's lame. That's so lame.
Yeah, it is really fucking lame. But that is the idea. Like, because if you think about it from a military standpoint, or from the standpoint of like,
so they're having a tribunal, and they're like, so Jered, you think the Nazis should have just gotten away with it? Is that what you think? You think the Nazis should have just?
Oh yeah, no, literally
let it happen because war's bad. Is that what you think, Jered?
Yes, I'm telling you,
that's ridiculous.
I had dozens of people talk to me because the other thing, like being in that unit, an infantry unit, and one of the only infantry companies in that part of Germany, because we were a Lurch company or whatever, like, you know, I'm just this fucking Joe. This is the E4 at the time. And like every fucking NCO in our company eventually like confronted me, like at their leisure, like not all as a group, like just like they would be like, McCorkle, let me tell you something. Hold on. You telling me if Hitler was here and he was killing a bunch of Jews, you'd suck his dick. That's what you're saying.
and you're like, yes, I would.
You're right. Yeah. You're standing in a parade dress and you're like, yeah.
You're just like, well, yes. That's what my Lord and Savior would say. If I got to kill and suck a dick, well, God bless me. I got to suck a dick.
No, accurately, you're like, Roger, that's Arn. And that's it. That's all you. And then just fucking yelling in your face.
Wow. Is that your computer or mine?
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know why.
Rude.
Well, no, it's doing that thing where it's like, I have to tell it all to go into my headphones. I don't know why. Okay. We good. Yeah. So for whatever, like you were coming in through my headphones, but then the rest of my computer.
Right. Gotcha. It's picking up by gotcha. So you were in the Army, and speaking of, you wanted to talk to me about guns.
I did.
You texted me and you were like, yo,
let's do it.
Let's talk about guns.
Yeah.
Because you love guns, man.
That's not really true. I do. I like guns. I like.
You love them. You love them. You, Jered, and guns. You love them.
Sitting in a tree.
SUICIDE. So it's like, because if you kiss a gun, it's gonna kill yourself. Ooh. How? Okay. I have. This is why I have this. I have a computer in front of me with questions that I've thought of beforehand to ask you. Mm-hmm. So it's not just you ranting for fucking 45 hours. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Right.
How long have you loved guns?
Yeah, so I don't think I'm not gonna like fight this comedy premise, but like what I tell people is like I don't really have any feelings about guns, right? In other words, like I've just always been around guns.
Why? Who has guns? Wait, okay, because you're from Georgia.
Right.
And you in the rural, like you rural Georgia.
No, not really. But no? I mean, I have family who are really rural. But I grew up in basically not the suburbs exactly, but you know, neighborhood, that kind of stuff.
Who gave you your first gun, and what grade were you in?
So here, the thing, nobody gave me my first guns. I never had guns.
Could you spell or
right?
Could you do math?
I could this is what I'm saying. This is like I didn't express any real interest in guns as a kid. Like, but they're just always around, right? Like, right. I mean, they were I would be exaggerating if I said every room of our house, but like many rooms of our house. And we would just shoot regularly. Like, I personally wasn't that into it, but anytime we went to my uncle's house, we would shoot guns and stuff like that.
What would you shoot, like cans?
Yeah, cans. And then, and then my dad would like throw up shotgun shells and we shoot the shotgun shells and stuff like that.
You know,
I've been hunting too, but I just wasn't that into it.
Yeah. Secret thing about me, I'm great at shooting skeet.
That's good.
And it's not and that's not a cum joke. I am legitimately good at taking a shotgun and shooting discs out of the air. I did that in Boy Scouts growing up. I was good at it.
Right. But the thing is that like, I feel like that's a unaccounted for thing. Like in the larger conversation is that like, yeah, there are, gun fetishists and especially, really like red state people that are like super into it. And obviously there are liberals that are really phobic about guns,
right?
And there's reasons to be, but then there's just a lot of people that are always, like I think of them. I don't want to exaggerate and be like, it's like a stapler or something like that.
So,
but I'm just saying it wasn't until after literally I joined the military
right.
and then got out that I thought of guns as a really political thing.
Right. So what was the vibe growing up around guns?
Really casual.
They were just there. Could you just be like, Pa, I want to go shoot a can in the woods?
It was like the kind of stuff where you would associate it with as a child as potentially dangerous, and you could get in trouble if you fucked with it. But like in the same way that like if I had like tried to start
like a car or something.
Right. I was going to say 4-wheelers or something like that. Like, right. Grow up and somebody's like uncle got fucking broke their leg on one, and that was what you think about it. But like my uncles and my dad used to hunt all the time, And so it was just like they would have their guns in them.
So I guess we have guns because we hunt, because we either like to hunt or we like to eat what we hunt and kill.
And like to shoot, like in other words, like to target shoot or something.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay.
And there's like a real like kind of like Southern mythos where the gun is sort of like symbolic of that. The gun for a lot of people in red states, I feel like is very much like the crucifix. It's this object.
Yeah, I believe that.
It's like this object of power that represents like way bigger concepts and ideas or something like that.
I mean, yeah, I feel like that's pretty clear from the internet. So then you were in the military.
I should also say I grew up before Columbine too.
When was Columbine?
Columbine happened when I was in high school. So,
okay.
So that was somewhere between 98 and 2001.
Okay. Was that like what was Columbine? That was the guy, that was the sort of Christian, existential end of the world people, sort of apocalyptic white kids that came in and shot up a school, right?
No. It was the trench coat mafia.
What am I thinking of?
I don't know that.
Weren't they the people who were like, do you believe in God?
Yeah, but they were.
They were anti-God.
Yeah, but it was more like I mean, a lot of not only like biographies have come out about that, but also like fictional, like Gus Van Sant did a movie Elephant is actually really good and kind of like tells that story. But anyway, it was like just two sad kids that got sort of picked on and were disaffected and neglected. Like, they didn't even come from that bad a place. It just seems like they had really like a sort of like neglectful home lives and shit like that. And they were seriously bullied in school. But that was the first like major school shooting that really put everything on the map. Right. I think it was also post like CNN. So it was like one of the first big shootings that also became 24-hour news and stuff like that. Interesting.
That is interesting. So you got into the military. I know you well enough to know phases of your life, but I don't really know the transitions between. I know you were a kid, presumably, and then you went into the army.
Yes.
And then you got out of the army and then went into philosophy in college.
No, there was like a 3 or 4 year period before that, or like maybe about 3 years where I just.
What were you doing in that time?
Living in a few cities. Like,
so boring. So then you.
Yeah, it's true. It's not.
So then you got into college and started doing philosophy, and that's where you started. That's why Plato's wall with the shadow, and that's why you bring
Plato's wall and the shadow
every 45 minutes. I'm like, man, I'm tired, and you're like, similar to Plato's wall with the shadow. I'm like, what, Mom? Why are you bringing this up?
So real quick, do another philosophy reference.
I think, therefore, I am.
Nice.
Bam.
The Cogito.
I got him. That's a Descartes. I know that too.
Hell yeah! Look at you.
Mm-hmm.
Good job.
Ask me more.
Seriously. Okay. Tell me about Hobbes.
He's an American guy, right?
No,
but he's British.
Yes,
but a lot of Americans like him because he's conservative.
He's somewhat conservative. Yeah, in a way. Yeah,
and traditionally conservative.
Yeah, I think in certain ways.
He was the one who said, "Give me freedom or give me death."
Incorrect.
He was the one who said "E tu Brute."
No, that was Julius Caesar. No, he's the guy that said man in the state of nature is nasty, brutish.
He was state of nature.
Mm-hmm. Well, he's one of many state of nature guys, but he described it as nasty, brutish, short. And I will say Hobbes is like kind of embraced by some leftists now in certain ways. But
right. Well, see, the thing about me is I know that men are flawed, and so I don't want to worship the men. I want to use the ideas. So if Hobbes,
right?
Who cares? Hobbes can come and go. But his ideas.
That's what philosophy's like. Which is that like when philosophers talk about like a person, when they like, oh, Hegel, right? They don't give a fuck about his biography or his personality. They mean like his way. It's like a thing of a computer program, like his way of thinking about.
Well, any true philosopher doesn't. Any philosopher doesn't care about Hegel's biography, but a true philosopher doesn't even remember his name.
Doesn't know it in the first place. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so then you were doing philosophy, and then basically you finished college, and then you started doing comedy, and that's when the best part of your life started because you met this guy.
We met.
Yeah, that's what it is.
When it really started to take off, and then like it started to like crash in the runway. Really, I mean, we're honest.
Because I left.
Yeah.
I left.
My co-pilot was gone.
But you entered into the military. So why did you growing up with guns? Why did you enter into the military? And did you growing up with guns make you be like, this would be cool?
No, I was like, I was gay. So that's psychologically had a lot to do with it. Like I'm gay, but and I was like coming to terms with that as my gender identity at the time. So it was kind of like, I was kind of.
Do you think you were trans?
Yeah, I still do.
What are you talking about? You said it so
I always have. I just no. But it was like I was just like
if you tell me you got a vagina, I'm gonna blow my brains out. That would blow my mind. It wouldn't change anything, but it would certainly blow my mind.
Oh, I would be so much more popular. No, I don't know. Maybe people hate me, but so the idea is that I think I just wanted to I was very much challenging the idea of people being like, if you're gay, that means these things about you. Cause I feel like in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was more gay prominence, but it was very specific kinds of gay people. Right. Like Queer as Folk was like a big show, and I was sort of like, I want to fuck all these people, but I'm not like them, or that's how I felt or whatever. So I was kind of like, part of me was like, don't tell me what I can't do or whatever, I don't know who I was talking to, but that was kind of the idea. Yeah. And then the other thing is I didn't really have any other prospects. And I don't mean that I didn't see myself as a loser or something like that, but I think that if you don't really know what you want to do, and I didn't know what I wanted to do yet, like career or college wise, then, if you're not going to do well in college or whatever, you're just like, okay, well, I'm just going to be some shiftless loser. That's going to work at the gas station or something like that. So, the military kind of made
way out of your small town.
Right. Yeah. And then that's the other thing, which is I'm just always been into adventure novels and comic books and things like that. And so it not being very realistic and not understanding anything about the world in any way, I think I saw it as this is a way to grow up and be a man and stuff like that.
You're reading Superman. You're like, wow, he's a hero and he goes around the world helping people. I'll go to Afghanistan. And help
right.
And then you get there and they're like, bomb the village.
Which is not an order you would expect to hear. No, that was me saying that. I was like, bomb the village.
Oh, you were into it?
I was me. Yeah. No, I should also say, we don't stick to this forever, but I also joined right after 9/11. So I joined June 2002.
Was that part of it?
I mean, that created
a surge of patriotism.
I wasn't patriotic, and I think a lot of people weren't patriotic in the sense of because I thought the whole thing was very confusing and I didn't really understand it much. I just meant that put in my head the military as an option. Right. Everybody started talking about it, stuff like that. I didn't become politically interested or conscious until during because I kind of grew up while I was in the military. And that's what happens when most people enlist, is that you're kind of becoming an adult at the same time. All that shit's going on. And the politics at the time were fucking crazy. So, it kind of made me political real quick.
And you said after you left, I forget exactly what the point was, but you said after you left home or after you entered the military, you saw guns as political.
No, it's what I'm saying is it didn't occur to me that they were political until, sometime after, until I started sort of paying attention, I guess, to formal political issues. In other words, everybody I had ever been around had either guns, literally everybody in my family, or had no aversion to guns, had experience with it.
Like in my family, we love pizza. We'd have pizza every Saturday. We'd go to church. We go to our Catholic church on Saturday.
And in my family, we would shoot a pizza. We would just get out that pizza.
10 points if you hit a pepperoni. So then we would do pizza. We would eat pizza every Saturday, and it was a nice thing that we would do as a family. Right. And then imagine being okay, Mom, Dad, I got to go to college, and then entering into college and being everyone being pizza? Your family liked pizza? Do you know what pizza has done to families in Yemen? And I'd be whoa, I didn't fucking know. But
I had no idea. Yeah.
I didn't know about the history of pizza like that. I didn't know how pizza was such a divisive thing. So that's how it kind of was with you and guns.
Yeah. And the stuff, it's there were political things with guns happening at the time. I'm not saying there weren't, but it's again, Columbine happened when I was in high school, but that got filtered to us as an issue of crazy kids. and we need more security at school. Like anybody, I think, not everybody, but a lot of people.
That narrative hasn't left since
no, it hasn't.
Boy.
It hasn't at all, and it still hasn't worked. Have you thought about this? More security. Right. And
no. Even more
than we had. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
I know last time
the security guards are killing people.
Still not
like
enough.
More of them.
More. Who's going to secure the security guards?
Exactly.
More.
Oh, that's deep.
That's
Who
deep.
watches the Watchmen?
I don't know that reference, JK.
Yeah.
No, I like the Watchmen.
But yeah, it's whatever. But yeah. So
I'm gonna go into a comic book.
I will.
Tangent.
No, don't make me.
Please don't.
I will.
Please don't.
I'll do it.
Please
no,
don't.
but so I'm just saying that like that didn't, I still didn't think of, like, it didn't even seem optional to me. Not that there would be like somebody could not have a gun. Like I knew plenty of people that didn't have guns. When I was a kid, I had no aspiration of owning a gun or anything like that. As a matter of fact, like when I was growing up, like if you're growing up in a rural town or a small town or something like that, you don't want to be like that. You know, I mean, or some people do, but like I was one of those like kind of, freakish, like trying to be esoteric, also gay. So kind of feeling different. Mm-hmm. And like, I thought of guns and shit, like stuff my dad would be into, or like some of my cousins.
Right.
But again, not like, oh, it's deeply dangerous. It just seemed like
guns to you was like Star Trek to me, because my dad liked Star Trek.
Right. Like, yeah. Like phasers.
I'm not going to watch Star Trek. My dad watches Star Trek.
Yeah. Exactly.
So then, okay. So, and then you started learning about guns, and I'm sure you've landed on some sort of political philosophy surrounding guns. So you're very smart. Here's a question about guns.
Okay.
Because this is something I don't know about you. Because I know vaguely, you said like, let's talk about guns because of like Uvalde and all these other shootings going on.
Right.
And I'm like, listen, I know what you're going to say because we're friends and we talked about it. But here's something I don't know. Whenever you think about, like, when you think about guns, because you have guns, right? You own a couple.
Yeah, I own a few.
Is that like, is asking me how many guns you own, like asking how big your penis is?
No.
Is it like, it's like,
I mean, I'll tell you this. Dog. I own more
it's
than
big, but I'm not going to give you a number.
I own more guns. And this is also kind of suggests, or what I'm talking about. Like I own more guns than I'm like to talk about. I'll say it, but I'm saying like I own the amount I have makes it seem like I'm more into guns than I am. Mm-hmm. And the reason I say that is like, I bought a few guns, and I actually had a phase when I got out of the military where I wanted to collect guns, like not like as an arsenal, just like I have a bunch of guns that I really like. I respect their history, and their mechanics are really interesting, and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, but then the other thing is I just inherited a number of them and stuff like that. So I have about 10 firearms.
Oh, that's not bad.
Yeah, no, it's exactly. But
you're ramping it up. You're like, not to build an arsenal, but what I have could blow North Dakota off the face of the map.
I definitely have like worked at coffee shops or whatever, where I told people that I had about 10 guns. And when I say about, I mean, like some of them are vaguely like whether they're my dad's or mine.
Right.
Like I have like a couple of shotguns that like he has at his house that I guess technically are mine or whatever. But.
Right. So you have guns. Whenever you think about guns, do you think, because I know your politics, you're like, leftist guy, and you're like, peace and love and rock and roll, and like, let's all get naked and like, you're all fucking whatever. Right. You're more class politics is really what you are. Right. But when you think about
love,
what?
I don't even like love. like not even into it.
Whenever you think about guns, do you think about rights? Do you view guns as a right you have? Do you point to when you're like, I have 10 guns and the Constitution and like, listen, maybe guns are hurting people, but the Constitution does say we are allowed. Like, does any of those talking points enter into your thoughts and beliefs?
Not at all. And so I'll back up and say, I don't give a shit about the Constitution. I don't care. I mean, I want there to be like a rule of law. And so what
if the SWAT team came in right now and was like, you can't say that?
I'd be like, you're goddamn right. I can't. I'm gonna shut the fuck up right now. But like, I don't like the idea of law enforcement or various authorities or political figures not paying attention to the Constitution, but because it represents the rule of law. And I don't think they should have like extra legal, abilities or something like that. But in terms of like, and I guess like, political principles or something like that. The idea that a bunch of like, and I don't want to reduce this, but a bunch of slave owning aristocrats in the 18th century have a better idea.
I'm offended for some reason.
I know.
Hey,
yeah, you're wearing a Thomas Jefferson.
That's my grandpa.
Right. That would be, anyway.
It's kind of true.
Yeah. Well, if you're a time traveler, like if you use your grandpa, but
grandpa's easier than
right. No, I get
less syllables, bitch. Let's move on.
Fair, but I don't think that they were better at locating what fundamental rights we ought to have, and so like, even if I was referring to like the importance of the Second Amendment, again, it would be on the basis of like, it's a law that we should observe until we change it. But I don't think it's specifically important. I'm a leftist. I consider myself a radical leftist and a socialist, and even a revolutionary socialist. I mean, some people might dispute that if they're like, really hardcore Maoist or something. But the point is like, even then I'm not that big into guns in a political sense. Like, I think that ultimately, right, even if I might say there one day would become an armed struggle or something like that, what we would need to do far before that is to organize and create a mass movement. We don't have anything like a mass movement where the use of guns would become relevant whatsoever. I don't think real politics involves like a Harper's Ferry situation. Honestly,
what is
I
that?
respect the John Brown attack on Harper's Ferry. John Brown. It doesn't matter. Like the point is like that. Is this like Thomas Hobbes? Because I know Thomas Hobbes. No, John Brown was like. Remember, he was the abolitionist that was like a radical. Happened to be white. He was white, and he killed a bunch of slave owners, and then in Virginia he did an attack on Harper's Ferry.
No, I guess I don't know this one.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff.
I'm not gonna read Black history about a white man. I'm sorry.
No, that's really fair. That's really fair. He was one of the good ones. I gotta say,
I'm sure he was. I'm sure he was like, we're gonna free these niggers. Yeah. It's like, all right, buddy, let's go.
So point is that like I don't care about the Second Amendment. I don't think it's interesting at all. I would completely. I would love right now if we just like after some sort of like revolution of some sort, soft revolution, whatever, we just drafted a completely new constitution. I'd be totally happy with that.
It's crazy when it comes to Constitution. It's crazy to think, because I was looking into Venezuela because they had because America's all like Venezuela. Oh, you want to see a failed state? Oh, go to Venezuela to see a failed state.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's as failed as
not at all
make it out to be. I think they're pretty. I think the rich people are upset. The rich people don't like Venezuela, but I think massive amounts of poor people. I mean, they love Hugo Chavez.
Yeah, you're not free to own like your own like massive oil concern there. They have no freedoms whatsoever.
Yeah, so I think they're actually doing all right over there. They're probably no one's as great as the greatest country on earth, but they're. But again,
happy. Just the idea that somehow our Constitution is magic and that's why we have freedom is just a really silly thought to have. Not even historically, just look at the various other countries that are free and relatively not as affluent as us, but relatively doing well that don't have like some magic constitution.
But that's not my point about Venezuela. Right. My point about Venezuela is that like Hugo Chavez was president for a while. And in that time, like, I think they redid the Constitution a few times.
Yeah.
Like they went in and they were like, it was one of these things where like, if the minority party didn't like what the majority was doing, this is probably wrong, but let's just say that if they didn't like what the majority party was doing, they can be like, okay, we want a new constitution. We have enough votes. And then they'd be like, okay. And then they would just build the Constitution from the ground up. And they did that under Hugo Chavez multiple times. So the idea that, and I think it's much more beautiful that your document that is because all a constitution is supposed to be is a document showing what the country is made of, what its constitution is. And as we know, over the last 300 years, our country has changed. More people are coming in, other people have come out, ideas, technology. And it's like, maybe we should reestablish what our country is with a new constitution, but ours is sacred and theirs is like a tool that allows actual people to live amongst each other in harmony. I think that's much more beautiful.
Well, I'm pretty agnostic as far as like whether or not this kind of like constitution is better than, I was gonna say the British don't have a constitution proper. I mean, they do, but like it's a series of like legal precedents and common law and stuff like that. So they don't have a single document of which all other things have to sort of, be checked against by their version of the Supreme Court or something like that.
Well, I'm not saying you need a constitution, but you do need some. I mean, especially for like, I don't know how old Venezuela is, but I mean, there was a revolution at some point. And whenever you have a revolution, you kind of need a guiding principles on what this new thing is going to be. Yeah. And so that's all a constitution is. Right. And the fact that they're updating theirs is great. And the fact that we don't, has its pros and cons, but it's
even in principle, and could be its own discussion. In principle, we can, but it's just the political
amendments.
So I was gonna say like, not only do we have, we have this process to amend the Constitution, but we also have a system that's so easy to create, like gridlock, and so hard to sort of do that it's pretty, I wouldn't say totally implausible, but it seems pretty, difficult to imagine amending the Constitution, even for something where 90% of the country might agree.
Right. It's fucking stupid. But anyway, so guns and all of that stuff. So, and you wanted to talk to me about guns. So what made you prompted to be like, yo, Tyler, let's talk about guns?
Well, okay. So what I'm going to try to do is not do the exact same thing I did with Roe v. Wade. Okay. Even though I think it's fundamentally,
which was what
my takeaway, which is to say that and because ultimately what I believe is that guns are not a discrete issue. Liberals want guns to be a discrete issue. Right. I mean, conservatives do as well, but I want to say a few things about conservatism and in terms of guns or whatever too. But just for right now, the idea that we can have the system that we do and just tweak the gun aspect is, I think, fundamentally ignorant for a number of reasons. One, where gun violence comes from; two, how to make political change in the country whatsoever. And I think it's silly because I think liberals often talk about being practical, right? Especially now with the vocabulary.
Common sense gun reform.
Right, right. Exactly.
Hey, come on. Let's just be reasonable about this. Yeah.
Right. Which is this almost Rawlsian idea, which is we can think of many things that would be good to do to make a fair, appropriate, safe, reasonable system. And liberals talk about that as if that's a practical approach. But the problem is you actually have to do things to change the government, right? You have to do things to actually make that political change happen, not just propose what you take to be reasonable shit and then I guess gripe about it and be smug about it.
If you think everyone should have 10 hugs daily because it makes your health better, it's you can't just say that. You have to how are we going to put that idea into a system and come out with a law that is going to make everyone get more hugs? Right.
And so going back to this notion that it's a broad systemic problem. So, I mean, there's several ways to express that. One is, I think that you have to think of guns like you think about drugs. And I don't mean from the freedom end. I mean that
hey, if you smoke them, if you got them.
Yeah, exactly. Smoke them if you got them. That's exactly right. No, but it's when the liberals get this with drugs, they understand that it's not just a carceral problem. They understand, or at least it's in the rhetoric, that poverty is sort of responsible for those things. You can't just you can't just cap it on the other end. If you want to deal with why people are addicted to drugs or why people resort to that stuff or why people get into that life on the kind of more business end of it, then you have to look at their economic conditions and stuff like that. We talk about guns.
Just say no to drugs didn't work, and just say no to guns won't work either.
That's right. I mean, or at least there's a sociological.
So elegant. That was really elegant. I'm just gonna put a little asterisk on that.
Please do put it in parentheses. Make that the GIF that But yeah. So there's a sociological component, which is that the idea that somehow we can kind of keep the system as it is, which is continuing to make people live more precarious, more impoverished lives. That's not going to equal more gun death is, I think, silly. And on the other end, the idea, it's sort of this issue of people's theory of what's reasonable political expectation necessitates these outcomes. In other words, if you want to do something where you're really putting a dent in gun death, you're going to have to do serious, overwhelming, sort of looking for the word, the big sweeping political reforms. And establishment liberalism basically suggests you should think those are impossible and not realistic. And if you think it, you have the Green Lantern theory of the presidency or something like that.
The closest thing I can think is liberals want to make climate change better, but the Green New Deal is crazy.
Right.
It's a similar sort of thing. So is everything you're saying right now, is that part of the thing that you didn't want to do this episode, or is this the new?
That's kind of that's what I didn't want to do. Or it's like,
okay,
that is going to be the thesis, but I just don't want to restate it. So sure. I think we can go through some details here about why that has to be, not just like, I have a broad theory of politics and that can be plugged into it.
Right.
Like, in other words, why a bunch of gun legislation that sounds like a good idea and it just probably wouldn't work. Now, you can say what you're going to say, but I'm sure this was obviously triggered by Uvalde, which is the shooting that happened there. And I mean, it's been like a week since then. It's like 14 new shootings. It's like fucking, it's like Facebook likes or something. They just keep coming. And right.
What did you see in that? I mean, of course, the unique thing about this one was that the police just didn't do shit about it.
Right.
Any thoughts?
Well, so, I mean, I'll be honest. I don't think Uvalde was particularly novel with what my take on it is.
Right.
Except for what you mentioned. And just if I was talking about sort of like general political conversations that are out there, this seems to be more vitiating of, and I don't think liberals are cynical about this. To pounce on this. This seems to be more vitiating of the Republican response generally. In other words, the idea is like, oh, anything to not talk about getting rid of guns or regulating guns or something like that. Let's talk about more cops. Let's talk about more security. Right. And the fact that in this, you have an example where all of those things were already in place and did not work. And moreover, seem to, I mean, it's like for Republicans, I think in the, what do you call it? Like, in the media cycle or whatever, that's awful, because like, not only are you seeing those attempts fail, you're also seeing another thing, which is the police looking craven and corrupt. I mean, not corrupt in the sense of like being paid off or something like that, but just like completely untrustworthy, just bucking up, not being cowards,
protecting and serving,
and more. And here's the thing that I think should be stated there, which is that they also lied immediately about what happened. So all of the sort of defenses of the police in that case, where people were saying like, oh, you don't know what it's like, and the life and death sort of thing, which was, by the way, I think is insane, right? I think the idea that if they were trained, the idea that they didn't go in, from what I understand, their training suggests that's absolutely what they were supposed to do.
Right.
And like being in the military and being a combat veteran, like, I mean, we just would have done what we were trained to do, because it's not about bravery. It's about the fact that like, you just train that constantly. But what they're doing, I imagine, is they're training on like shaking down, like, minorities and poor people and stuff. And the reason,
and they're great at it.
Right. Well, and what did they do? Right. Like, what did they do? I guess they panicked and they were like, well, we'll just wait until I guess the real cops get here or whatever. But in the meantime, we're going to mace the parents of those kids. So they did go to their training, like practice did make perfect or whatever.
It's one of these things where it's like black people forever have been saying like, fuck the police, this, that, and the other.
Right.
And white people have been like, okay, that's not appropriate. And then slowly over time, they're like, that's not appropriate, to like, okay, I see what you're saying, but that's a bit extreme, to like, okay, sure. And then like George Floyd happened and they're like, okay, yeah, fuck the police,
Yeah.
And they're not very nice to black people, but like, we do still need them to help us. And then we're like, nah, man, they like, we call them too. They don't come. And it's like, come on, but if there's really a thing, then they'll come and help. Right. And it's just fuck the police has been the only thing that's been consistent about police over the last few decades, is just fuck them.
And also, like, especially, I mean, I generally have an anti-cop attitude, right? I think that's complicated. I don't think every cop is a bad person. I don't think that's how you understand it. But like, specifically, fuck these police. Like, and I think they are actually emblematic of police on the national scale, but it's like the conservatives that were trying to apologize for them. To me, it's insane, because again, and this is the point I was going to make, if they fucked up, if they had cowardice, like they just were not trained well, and they were crippled by fear and they didn't want to know what to do, and they copped to that, no pun intended, if they just said that's what happened, ironically, the country is really forgiving and afraid of those situations. And I think people would be like, they need to be retrained. They can't be cops, but we feel they not only did they immediately concoct like 4 different stories, they tried to blame a motherfucking teacher. They tried to pin it on a teacher.
Yeah. Do you think cops, like the thin blue line, they're the thin blue line between order and chaos.
Yeah.
Do you think cops are like middle managers? Like they have to justify their own existence to an extent. You know what I mean?
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's like this shit happens and they can't just be like, you know what, we're sorry. We apologize. And, we're going to do better next time. Like they feel the need to constantly protect like their reputation and their image. And why would you do that? And it's like, even though they know in this situation, like this is a terrible situation to be trying to be doing what they've been doing with that. But it's like, you know what I mean? Like if they protect their image, then they can continue to exist because really they're not as useful as they're trying to make themselves out to be.
Right. Well,
maybe their budget has gotten inflated and they're like, oh fuck, like we don't actually need all this, but we have to. We can't. Once you get money, you can't lose it. So it's like we gotta stay strong and not show weakness.
I think that's a lot of things, and I think they're probably all true to one degree or another. So I was gonna say, like, one, I do think they're relatively just tribal as a group. It's a kind of categorical thing. Like you're a cop or you're not a cop. And I think that like when they get criticized, especially when it's not like just that one guy, it's like it seems like in their capacity as law enforcement agents or whatever, like somebody is saying they fucked up or whatever. I do think they circle the wagons, and I think it becomes more important that they protect themselves. And sort of like you're saying too, I do think that there's a sense where they overstate their importance. And you want to talk about a group of people that just can't be appreciated enough. I would say that like what they should do as a people is tell those cops that say that shit in interviews to shut the fuck up. You know what I mean? Like the constant, like, people don't understand. People don't understand. This is a situation where it's like, we don't understand that you waited 45 fucking minutes while children were being killed. What? Like the funny thing is they have all these interviews of parents there and no one for a moment doubts that like with just a big heavy stick, those mothers would have gone through that door and would have died and probably would have killed that guy. I mean, because you 4 or 5 of them at once going through that with broomsticks. He's probably not gonna kill. I mean, he was a pussy. Like it wasn't gonna win, right? Yeah. So yeah, So that was some of the stuff about the cops, though. What did you see in the response to that? Like in the media and the political response to all of that stuff? Well, I don't think it was a particularly novel situation in terms of guns or why gun legislation. And I do want to get into the granular aspects of some of that about why a lot of it's ill-conceived. The one thing that I actually think that people are starting to catch on is that certain kinds of gun legislation probably doesn't make sense. That's been a thing about that you've always said to me whenever like the Republican talking points are sort of the Jered talking points in this case, because whenever it's like, some of these bans aren't going to help. Some of these assault rifle bans aren't going to help because most of the time, whenever people kill somebody, it's with a handgun or it's with this kind of gun or that kind of gun. And I know one of the things you said is to me is like just all the conversations around gun reform from Democrats shows that Democrats really don't know what they're talking about when it comes to guns. Right. For me, several levels. One is, again, about what guns are and how they operate. Right. And there are a bunch of sort of like cosmetic differences between certain guns that people have picked up from TV and from also sort of like the osmosis of political conversation. Like a Glock. Right. Well, that's a pistol. That's a very common gun. Glock 44. Yeah. Well, that Magnum 45. No, none of this. Now we've gone off. There's a Glock 40. There's a Glock. I can't remember the designation, like the number. I think Glock 23, maybe. It's 45. It's 33 shots from twin Glocks. That's 16 apiece, which means it's a Nas song. I was singing the lyrics to a Nas song. All that math makes sense except for one bullet, which I don't. So that's what the song is. He said 33 shots from twin Glocks. That's 16 apiece, which means 27 went into your crew. 6 bullets hit your crew. 1 went into you. He does the whole thing. It's a very good. Yeah. Everybody gotta die. I can do the whole song if you want. Everybody gotta die sometime. See, he knows more about guns. By use, because he shot somebody. I'd have to listen to it because I don't know where that 33rd bullet. But then Nas did the song where I know I can be what I want to be. If I work hard in it, I'll be where I want to. And then it's like, all right, can we go back to the Glocks, man? Trying to help the children, dog. Talk about them. So just
one missile in a bazooka. I pulled the trigger. The next song. bigger gun is what I want for the next.
So
song.
the point is, like, I think liberals don't understand guns, and we can talk some about that. I think they also they're not realistic as liberals. Like, because they're liberals, they're also not realistic about the political situation, which is like logistically what you'd have to do, the scope of the issue. And by the way, I'm not saying this in some like a priori, it's impossible to do these things politically. Like, in other words, most of the kinds of legislation that liberals sort of suggest, I don't think are fundamentally impossible in some imaginary society. They're reasonable. They're good ideas. They just like, first and foremost, we need fewer guns for much of their solutions to make any sense. How you get those fewer guns, you could do things like massive buyback programs, right? The problem is the scope of that is just at the dollar amount. You know, I mean, you're probably
there's more guns than people,
right? It's probably in the trillions of dollars.
So what, like $5 a gun? Let's say that's still
no. So, but here's the deal:
$1.5 trillion.
So, to do a buyback program that we could do, which means to get by the Second Amendment, meaning like you're not actually mandating anybody sell their guns, but you're offering guns. You'd actually have to give a relatively decent market price, right? And so an AR might run anywhere from, and that's a very common weapon, right? That might run anywhere from like at the very lowest end, like $400, not the lowest, but sort of retail 400.
So 400 times 300 million guns.
But that's to 400 to $3,000. Right. So,
but let's just keep it. My phone only does so many numbers.
Right. So it's an average of let's say an average of $1,000. Right. I would say. And the point is you have to make more. You have to offer more money so people are willing to sell.
It's that much.
That's a lot. I don't even know what that means on your calculator.
1.2 E to the 11.
Oh, that's too many. And
that's too much for the phone.
Yeah. So the point is it would be this sort of massive political thing. And again, you could hypothetically do it, but you'd have to have a completely different political culture. And I think in many ways, liberals aren't interested in getting us to that situation.
Right.
Another good example, another thing, just in terms of legislation, right? Like you also have to do things that, again, not most, sort of, what's the word? Like, just normal liberals, right? Like apolitical people but as far as the Democratic establishment is concerned, like the idea of passing major legislation on that scale, like you'd have to get rid of the filibuster and I'd say you'd have to start adopting political positions that could build a massive Democratic coalition.
Yeah. You'd have to be an actual leader.
Right.
You'd actually have to care about the outcome of something instead of just, I mean, I feel like the Republicans care about the outcomes of the things that they're doing, but the outcomes are just the worst outcomes. Right. And the Democrats don't really care about the outcomes. They just want to be seen as they're doing something.
Or they might want to do something about the outcomes, but there's another thing that they prioritize, which is not radically changing the system. And I think there's any number of demographics in that have a reason not to. Some is just general risk aversion. Yeah. Others is people who are very like privileged and under the system and might find its, kind of brutality repugnant, but generally aren't going to be willing to sort of sacrifice that. There's also general, we live in a culture war now where people are terrified, I think, to a level that's blown out of proportion of the other party and what happens if the other party gets in power. So any sort of risks or whatever, especially of like reforming your own party, seem off the table. So there's a lot of reasons for why liberals are less likely to take on these big sort of bold things.
I had a friend, he's still my friend, John Barry. Shout out to John Barry in Chicago. He's like you. He's one of my like leftist friends that knows more than me. And I just throw questions at him and he answers it. I love
it. Sounds like a winner.
It sounds like a conversation between y'all would be exhausing.
It'd be interesting to know what we disagree about, but go ahead.
That would be interesting. Actually, I should get him on. He'd probably be
do like a panel.
I would just bring popcorn. I would host.
You'd be dressed like Kermit the Frog.
I would have the Zoom open. I would just have my popcorn and be like, throw something out there and see what happens.
Just moderate. Yeah.
But moderate my moderation would be like, yo, John, you gonna really let him say that?
He's like, but we agree.
That?
We both worked for Bernie's campaign. No, or whatever.
Well, probably. I mean, he's in that. But he said like this country likes to pretend like there's thousands of problems that we have to deal with. But really there's like 7. And if we dealt with those 7 problems, then we could actually start to turn the ship and make it go in a better direction.
Right.
But there's so many people on Democrats and the Republicans. Rich people is what we call them. There's so many rich people that are invested in those 7 problems because they can continue to make money off it. Like, don't give people health care. Let's just fucking charge them way too much. Let's not stop war. Let's just keep doing war. Let's just keep people poor. Let's just keep people dumb because we make lots of money off of that. And whenever I look at situations like this, or even these sort of like, I mean, I know the gun issue is a real issue, but it's also weaponized by the culture war where I look at those things and I feel so bad and I just feel numb to it. I feel numb to every single fucking news story. I'm numb to every single black person that gets killed. I'm numb to every single school shooting because I know the simple things it would take to actually fix it. And I know that the political system is in such a fucking shamble. Not even in a shamble. It's not in a shambles. It's working just as it should. And it's just not made, at least right now, it's been turned into a system that's not made to work for anything good to happen. So it's like, can you believe what happened in Uvalde? Yeah, I fucking can. Yeah. And what are we going to do? Nothing. I'm so cynical at this point. There's nothing we can do.
Well, no. So I'll say I'm not cynical necessarily. I think the chips are stacked against us, but like, I think what people have to wrap their heads around is that it isn't that there isn't a thing we can do. It's that thing is very hard, but I agree with you and what your friend was saying, that thing is simple, right? It's just pretty, it's sort of like, like getting in a fight, right? To win the fight is simple, right? It's the difference between, it's not as difficult. Exactly. It's hitting the person really hard until they stop fighting.
Pinch, kiss.
So the difficulty is like how laborious it is, how much work it is. It's not how do we figure this out? And that's precisely, I think you have to understand that point, because I think liberals, when they approach this kind of stuff, they're like, how do we fix this? And that's true. If you want to maintain the same fundamental kind of politics, what you'd have to do is this weird labyrinthine kind of Byzantine thing that's going to get you basically nothing. And that's sort of, I think,
that is a big difference between Democrats and Republicans, or liberals and conservatives, whatever you want to say in this country, is that conservatives, their pitch is very simple.
Right.
They are just, and you know what? They're right on some level. On some level, it is simple. It's like on some level, I don't watch Fox News. I don't know what the fuck they're saying, but like on some level, it's like, yeah, we do just need to be kind to one another. Like that is true. We do need to be kind and we do need to remember where we came from. And all lives do matter.
That's it. It's like, I guess they do. Yeah.
And then liberals are like, defund the police, and it's like, well, what the fuck does that look like? And it's like all these lines and twists, and Obama comes out and he's like, well, you got to understand that when it comes to Wall Street, there's lots of derivatives underneath this and that that flow into, and the fog of war in Afghanistan, we don't really know what's going on, and it's just like y'all are just killing motherfuckers, just leave. Yeah. And it's like, well, we can't do that, and that's too simple, and then. Yeah,
and basically after that complicated like Rube Goldberg machine, the end of it is always going to be like, we can't have a more democratized society. And that's kind of what I'm getting at, is that like if you had a large enough coalition. So a good example, right? I want to back up and just say for the listener, like there's not a piece of gun legislation you could mention that I'm usually against. I think that people think that I'm doing this casuist kind of like, oh, these don't work because secretly I'm trying to protect gun laws. I just don't really give that much of a shit about them because I don't think that they would do much to solve the problems they're suggested to. But I would be fine with it. And so going back to the issue, like the idea of background checks, something like, I think like 80% of people who are polled, I mean, you look at the data, but it's very high, think that like there should be a national registry or that we need stronger like red flag laws or any of these sort of things. But because you don't have a large Democratic coalition that sort of like creates political pressure, because everything is split 50-50 through the culture war, you can't have big sweeping legislation like the kind you'd need to pass basically anything of substance.
Right. Tell me what are, whenever it comes to guns, because you actually know stuff about guns, what are Republicans right about guns?
Right. Okay. So the biggest deal is that, so assault weapons generally, I mean, there's a way that doesn't mean anything, right? Like assault weapons isn't so much a category. A lot of that language comes from like the Brady Bill, which, defined assault weapons as a number of some ergonomic, some cosmetic, some sort of functional.
Is assault weapon like a legal term that was sort of like invented for legislation?
Yeah, in a sense, like the Brady Bill was an assault weapons ban, and that had like any number of things. Like it couldn't have a pistol grip, it couldn't have a high capacity magazine, it couldn't, all these sorts of things, and it was allowed to expire in like 2005. But it doesn't refer to a specific kind of weapon. So you have that issue, which is just the idea that like assault weapon is a kind of general sort of catch-all for a number of things, that some of which have nothing to do with the weapon's capacity or its potential danger. Like, so a pistol grip, as that looks very military-ish, right, but it just doesn't have anything, as opposed to it's like sort of normal stock, like you'd imagine, like with a shotgun, has no pistol grip. Right. They do have shotguns with pistol grips, but you get the point, right? So there's that. There's also this issue of ARs being particularly dangerous, and that's a complex conversation. But I'll say this: for the kinds of things that people really seem to want to avoid, which are school shootings or mass shootings, right? They aren't particularly more dangerous than a pistol or something like that. People hear that they're semi-automatic, and people that don't know anything about guns assume that that's a very specifically dangerous like mode of a weapon.
Right.
I'll say this: almost every weapon, almost every pistol for sure that you've ever seen is semi-automatic. A revolver is semi-automatic. And
then what does semi-automatic mean?
It means you pull the trigger and it fires one round.
So then what's the opposite of a automatic?
Well, an automatic is general. I mean, that's
you hold.
vague.
I imagine you hold it.
Yes.
If I know from Call of Duty, you hold it and it just shoots.
And they call that fully automatic.
Right.
Oftentimes, because sometimes automatic refers to the difference between, let's say, when you're talking about pistols, between a revolver and like an automatic pistol. So it looks like, a Glock or something like that.
Oh,
the basic.
Will you sing the song again?
Yeah, please do. Not. Yeah. So the point is that like Uvalde, the reason I mentioned this before, he was in that classroom for 45 minutes, it doesn't matter what kind of gun you have at that point.
Well, Well, let me push back on you with this.
Right.
Faster bullets, more death.
Not really, not unless people are wearing sort of body armor. So what I was going to say is that like, if you think about an AR, it's a rifle. And the difference between rifle and pistol rounds generally is that rifle rounds have more powder, a smaller weighted round to the ratio of the powder. And so the idea is that it's higher velocity and generally more penetration. That's generally true, right?
So
pistol rounds are slower. Usually they have somewhat less penetration.
So if you shot me with a pistol, it would hurt.
Right.
And if you shot me with an AK or an AR,
which would be like a 7.62,
it would still hurt, but it would just be faster and harder.
And well, so this is why they're not that dissimilar in terms of mass shootings, right? Is that in terms of your body, it's pretty similar.
Right.
Like,
but if I was wearing a hat.
If you were wearing some sort of body armor, but I mean, I've seen a 9mm go through a Kevlar helmet. So it's not as if they're easy to stop by any means. For almost any conventional civilian situation, especially in anything like close quarters, the difference between somebody who has a rifle, like a semi-automatic rifle, and a pistol is really marginal. And that's hard for people to wrap their head around. They think that...
Because but how much does a pistol hold?
So,
if I had a 6-shooter,
right,
I can kill less than if I had a 30. I had one of those those with the vest, the vest of bullets that go around diagonly.
Yeah, that's
like
a big thing.
Like Mardi Gras beads.
Yeah, that's how you. Exactly. No, so you've said a lot. So one, let's just so your AR has a 30 round magazine. Generally, they make 20 round, they make 10 round magazines, but generally a 30 round magazine is pretty standard. A pistol, like a double stack 9mm, has like usually 15 rounds, right? So the difference, first of all, isn't that great. And also people have to understand that this is a liberal fiction that people like to say in conversation, the idea of like, okay, but if he had just a few rounds less and he had to reload that magazine, that would give them the time. Now, even away from the Uvalde thing with like, well, it doesn't take them 45 fucking minutes to reload. Away from that, this is how long it takes to reload a pistol magazine, right? And I've reloaded, like literally. It's not an exaggeration. Because
you press the button and it falls, and then you get the other one and you go
right,
and then they do the top.
It's the time it takes to take something out of the pistol, the bottom of the pistol, the magazine well, put it in your pocket, and take something else out of your pocket or some pouch or something like that. So it's just not a meaningful difference. Any
of these democratic things that they're trying to do, the Democrats are trying to. Any of these reforms that they're trying to make are largely going to be ineffective, you think? Because
I think in this case, people are beginning to understand that the difference between the weapon, generally speaking, is marginal relative to people dying, right?
Right.
What I think if we're going to talk about legislation, like if we were going to try to pass something in this system,
if you were king for a day,
right,
and you could fix this school shooting problem, what would you do?
I think next to nothing. But the reason I say this is that like mass gun death, like mass shootings at schools are rarefied. I've looked into the data. Like there's not a lot of data. Like the Rand Corporation did a huge like report on this where they can talk about different kinds of gun legislation and their varying effects on sort of large sample size kind of gun death, right? Like high statistic stuff like suicide or, a kind of like, shootings that might take place in like, kind of like between drug gangs or something like that. But what they don't have is a lot of like, there's just not enough data to know what effect those things have on something like mass shootings.
Right.
So mass shootings are maybe one of the hardest things to do anything about. And the irony, of course, is that they're, really rare relative to most other gun deaths, but they're the ones that especially liberals really, really care about.
Yeah. Now, in the last episode, we were talking about Roe v. Wade, or you were pro-abortion. Yeah. And in this one, I just asked you if you were a dictator, you would not do anything about gun reforms. And so you're anti-gun reforms. Why do you hate children?
I'm not anti-gun.
Why do you hate children?
Yeah, exactly.
I
just think abortion should be done with guns.
Yeah, okay. There you go. Okay. Didn't you have an abortion gun joke? Wasn't there something?
I'm sure I tried to work on stuff.
I'm sure you had something where people were like, "Oh,
yeah." I've gotten a lot of that over the years, but
one of the things you talked about before was how the thing about the number of gun deaths in the country versus where they come from, and if you really want to reduce gun deaths. If you look at the numbers, most people who die by gun, it's suicide.
That's right.
And the smallest number of people, it is mass shootings.
Right.
So I think because what you were sort of getting at is how this liberal hysteria over mass shooting. I mean, it's a gruesome thing and it's a terrible thing and it's a random thing that feels so out of place. I mean, like even if it's a gang shooting, which is obviously bad, like we sort of get the rules. These people hate these people and they fight. People fight. That's normal. But how normal is it I guess it's abnormal from an evolutionary standpoint. It's normal from an evolutionary standpoint for two groups to fight each other. It's abnormal for one person to be able to destroy a whole community in a way.
Yeah, like, I'm not a big fan of evolutionary psychology in this way, which is like trying to figure out like why things upset us.
I'm just like talking.
No. I'm not saying.
But my point is, it's a small amount of people. Right. Suicide's a large amount of people. Talk more about that.
Well, yeah. So I mean, I'll concede, by the way, that there does feel it feels differently to people, the idea of that kind of chaotic violence. And especially when you have these really awful, horrifying examples of children being killed. I understand why at an emotional level, that's harder to see. And I don't even think it should be dismissed. I don't want to do like a Ben Shapiro, like the facts don't care about your feelings sort of things. It is worth thinking if what we're talking about is not really being able to prevent anything entirely, like we're doing sweeping legislation, meaning we're probably going to be like shaving off the margins, then the legislation that we're going to pass ought to care about lives saved and not just preventing the most dramatic stuff that will also be the most difficult to prevent.
I guess it's sort of like if you want to help out Africans, if you want to help out poor Africans, you're like, what do I need to do? Do I need to build a well? What do I got to do? Do I got to give my heart to a small Congian boy? So like, I'll do it if I have to. And they're like, no, can you buy mosquito nets? Because malaria is ridiculous. And it's just not a sexy response.
Right.
Because that's what's going to help the most people. But
and because a lot of our moral,
I'm saying it out loud. I'm like, that's a bad analogy, but you get what I'm saying.
I do. And I think because a lot of our moral intuitions are really more calibrated towards, very interpersonal situations and small numbers of people and things like that. Like the best example I've heard about this is if I told you that I had an uncle that killed a child with a shovel in Vietnam, you're going to feel a certain way about what kind of person he might be.
A shovel?
Yeah, like right. But if I said
that's what I'm concerned with. A shovel?
It's awful. But if I said to you that I had an uncle that was a pilot, like a bomber pilot in Vietnam, you would probably not feel that bad about him. Just like, oh, he was in the war or whatever. But that person would have invariably killed far more kids.
Right.
Invariably. Right. And again, does that mean you're wrong to feel that way? It's like, no, because what it would take for a person to kill a child with a shovel is different than pushing a button. So I understand our regard for that kind of like personal monstrosity. I think we do have to reckon with the idea if we're trying to save people's lives, one, mass shootings are just not very high on the list. And we do have to have a strong reason why we're going to prioritize that. My larger feeling about it is that I think people are very cynical about this. And I think liberals have a hard time reckoning with their privilege, essentially, is what it comes down to. So in other words, if you really care about saving lives, if it's just about that, and if they're not just accidents, we're not just talking about, oh, bad things happen, like suicides, like people who deaths of despair, real shit, right? Or people like if you're killed with a gun, it's because you're going through some awful shit and you have access to a gun and you're probably, if not below the poverty line, at least like, to the left of the median, income or something like that, or because you're some like young black kid, in a really, really bad neighborhood and there's really drug gangs, or you're a young woman and your fucking boyfriend's a redneck or whatever. Those are the people who are being killed by guns. But the thing is that the people who have a lot of power over our political situation, both materially and in an ideological sense, they're not worried about those gun deaths, right? They're not worried about those happening to them, because they have basically, kind of like blunted themselves from those sorts of occasions. But what they can't sort of completely prevent is some crazy person at a shopping mall. And so they do fear those sorts of things.
Right. I'm middle class or whatever. I'm not worried about gang violence.
Right.
I'm not worried about fucking I'm not worried. My life is steady enough that I'm not close to suicide. I don't know anybody who's close to suicide because of actual like systemic, structural, we're poor, we're desperate situations. I don't got to worry about that. So I'm not really worried. I'm not concerned as much about that as I am about, but I could be at a mall. I could be at a movie theater. I do go there. And the fact that random violence could break out there is naturally more terrifying. And also all those things, it's weird and how normalized they are, and again, I don't want to just pick on liberals. I just think conservatives are in a kind of death cult and there is no way to really, it's a longer conversation, but I think it's a kind of like ideological, like perfect sphere that's really hard to penetrate. So liberals, as much as I shame them, part of it is that I do think that you can sort of like have a nuanced discussion where you're trying to leverage the things they say they care about
with how their politics operate.
Well, I know one of the things that the first time you told me that about like, suicides are like 35,000 a year, and then mass shootings are like 300 or some shit. Like it's just the difference is
I think it's like 600 and something, but yeah, you're right. It's over half of the around 45,000 gun deaths we have. And there has been an uptick since COVID.
Sure.
Like
yeah.
Pretty strong one. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but like over half of those are suicide. That's what I was gonna say is like liberals have a tendency to like kind of feel like those are weirdly like normalizable or natural.
Right.
And if they're not, they're at least these awful systemic problems that what could we ever really do about it?
Yeah.
Guns feel like an aberration, mass shootings feel like an aberration.
But the thing is, if you look at the smallest amount, which is mass shootings, which is the scariest, and if you look at suicide, which is it's like suicide's the biggest, but the most singular because it's one person. And then mass shootings are the smallest, but the craziest because it's one person doing it to so many people. It seems like the common factor with gun deaths is mental health. It seems like, isn't that the answer to everyone's gun death problem?
Yeah, of course. But like not really. I mean, especially the conservatives, the problem with the conservatives, they mention mental health and then they immediately are like, but we never fund it. I mean, because they sort of mean it as a judgment. They mean it like, oh, it's just crazy people. I'm like, what do you do? You can't. Crazy people are evil.
Can't get rid of
evil
crazy.
Is part of humanity. Yeah. It's just like a,
it's that whole cultural thing that we talked about last time, where it was like, there will always be there's always be evil, and we always must fight the evil. And it's like, and they're just like, thank God we have guns, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to stop the crazy person with a gun.
But also liberals say, no, we need funding for very specific kinds of institutions. And you say, well, how are you going to do that? I was like, well, we can't, because Joe Manchin. We can't do anything about it. Right. We do need it, and we agree, and it would be nice, but we really can't do anything about that because, and there's more to say, but I don't want to get sidetracked. But yeah, so I agree. It's a massive, because the other thing too is that like even talking about mental health is like just another word for poverty. It's not entirely, it's more complicated in certain ways, but like basically it's people who have mental health problems and have no resources to deal with those mental health problems. Like, so for instance, like, rich cunts going to therapy is a mental health problem, but because like their pressures don't usually end up with like a 9mm in a fucking like school, we don't talk, so yeah, I mean, but yeah, so even talking about mental health problem, if that's a way to direct our attention to these massive systemic issues that come from people's deprivation from resources, that's awesome. That's the conversation we should have. If it's a way of distracting us from the fact that like you have to reform the political system or where this stuff is just necessarily going to happen, then they're not any different than the fucking thoughts and prayers people.
Damn, that's a mic drop right there.
Oh yeah, that's all I got. That's
pretty good. That's pretty good right there. Yeah. Not to shut you up, but
yeah.
Shut the fuck up. You know what I mean? So what do we do? What do we do, Jered Bear?
Yeah. So because I keep kind of like suggesting there's nothing you can do. There are things you can do, and there are things that I agree with. I don't think they have the effect that people think they would. And I did want to say, like, the reason the mass gun death thing, the mass shooting thing is weird to me, because like, liberals in their pretend practicality would say, no, we have to do something. We have to do something. It's like, okay, but if what we're saying is we're only going to be able to like do little things around the margins, then let's make the kinds of legislation tailored to getting the most around the margins. And if we direct it around people's fear of mass shootings, it might make you feel more safe, but because that's such a hard thing to deal with, because it's so rarefied, because most of the things that might save a lot of lives probably wouldn't target that well, it is probably a waste of resources and a waste of time. As opposed to, I am generally for, if we're going to do gun legislation, it should be targeted around preventing the wrong people from getting guns.
Yeah, and
as opposed to the wrong kinds of guns or something.
If politicians were trying to do anything good, it seems like both sides could get around that, could get behind that.
Right.
I even saw as Kellyanne Conway was on Trevor Noah the other day, and her conclusion for guns was just like, we just got to make sure that the wrong people don't get guns. And Trevor was like, really? And she was like, yeah. I was like, well, look at us. Well, look at us, Kellyanne. And then she was like, Biden sucks. He's also stupid and ugly. And then he's like, all right, we got to go. All right.
It's like, you're making a lot of good points at the end. I don't know what to do. I mean, but it's a difficult situation. I mean, there's a huge black market. So people are getting guns illegally, and it is hard. That's a law enforcement problem, and that's difficult. I mean, for all the reasons we mentioned before about why law enforcement fucking sucks.
But also like, I mean, Australia did it. Do you know how they did it?
Yeah, so it's complicated. They had way more guns.
Oh, really?
Sorry, vice versa.
Way less.
Like we have way more guns. I don't know.
Confiscate like 14 guns, and they were like, "We did it."
And the thing, I mean, I read this, and please double check if you're listening, like, because it sounded wrong.
Because I won't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
just to be clear for everybody.
But it says that like the buyback program they did only got rid of like, I think like maybe 30% of their guns. They just had so much less. And I think the cultures are different. I really do. I mean, and there are other countries, and we don't talk about this enough, even though I do think that a big part of this is we have too many guns. It's sort of like we have too many guns for us. We have too many guns for our political attitudes and how we think about guns. There are other countries, many people have pointed this out, that have a lot of guns. I mean, even places that are dangerous, right? Even I think Lebanon has like a comparable amount of guns and far less like person to person, like domestic gun death. After the massive shooting in Norway, I can't remember what happened. I think in the early 2000s or mid 2000s or something like that. They didn't pass any gun legislation, and they still haven't had a gun death since that. There are countries like Finland and Sweden and Israel also that have a bunch of guns per capita. I mean, so there's also some.
I've heard this. You want to hear that? Have you heard this before? And then I die. Have you heard this before? That a lot of I heard this on Breaking Points. That there's a correlation of gun deaths and specifically also like white supremacy, recruitment going up after we have a bunch of war. So it's like we send kids like yourself to war, and then they kill a bunch of women and children like you did, and then they come back.
No, I didn't kill any children. What are you talking about?
And then they come back, and then they have all this training, and they were just in this group of people with their brothers, and they know brotherhood, and they know fighting for a cause. And they say, I mean, I don't know if you ever felt this whenever you were at war or whatever the fuck you were doing, but like life is like heightened, like everything's like in HD or whatever. Right. And then they come back and they're fucking bored and life is stupid and everyone's talking about American Idol. And so they're like, fuck it. I'm depressed and this country is lame. I'm going to shoot everybody up, or fuck it. I'm going to join this white supremacist group and go into these dark web places and come out a fucking incel terrorist and then do some shit.
Yeah. It's not a great time, right? Like but I kind of there's a lot to make sense of, and
I think according to Crystal, hear me. She was like, it's a legit thing. It's not just one of Tyler's ramblings.
No, I agree. I'm not disputing that at all. I think that's probably very true that you are a bitch, but like, no, but in terms of like trying to make sense of it. So one thing I would say is that especially in combat arms, like there's usually a process of like conditioning new soldiers and all soldiers, but I mean, especially in like basic training and early training, to like get to normalize violence and be comfortable doing it. And there's been a lot of like sort of, you might call it psychological technology. I just mean like sort of psychological techniques since the Vietnam War to make soldiers more comfortable and willing to kill people essentially. And hasn't really gotten that good at dealing with the PTSD afterwards.
Right.
But so if you have a bunch of people who
sounds like it brings us back to mental health, though. I'm just saying.
Of course. Well, so here's the point about, I think this is an interesting way to think about mental health is that like, these are normal people, at least psychologically, at least initially. So in other words, it's not what you'd think about like deviant psychologies or something like that, like somebody with like social or antisocial personality disorder or something like that. This is, you can take almost any person or most people like that, especially within that first standard deviation, put them through a kind of like military training program, especially in combat arms where that's the focus. And you're going to get an output of a person who's more comfortable and more willing to fire at the enemy. And then I can totally see not just boredom or something like that, but you take that person and then you put them in a political environment that is more and more militant in its language. And then, you're going to have a combination of people that are sort of more comfortable with being violent and understanding it as a meaningful political solution. And then you're going to have media saying, kind of using that language, like we're under attack and, this is an issue of civilization and these people hate you and stuff like that. And then there's going to be a subsection of those people that are actually probably more generally volatile, kind of like concrete thinkers. So that, of course, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you really if you send people to war en masse, and especially it's an open war like Iraq and Afghanistan, where it's like public and stuff like that, you're going to see way more messages explaining why these are sort of necessary, inevitable. We have to do this kind of thing. Right. And so, it doesn't shock at all.
You send a kid to another country and have them kill people and say it's to protect our country, and then you send them back and then tell them Black people suck. It's like, yeah, you're going to kill some. It's like,
right. And also those people that haven't gone to the military and maybe they're insecure about their inability to do that kind of thing, or maybe they just, they think they're in some sort of like, Reddit, like born kind of conspiratorial war or something like that. And they think this is a way to make good on it. And then the other thing I'll say is that like I sort of suggested before, a lot of people join the military to create meaning in their life, to be important and significant. And if you have a bunch of people who are completely downwardly mobile politically, and within that group, they're unattractive, they can't find, they're incels and shit.
I'm offended again.
Yeah, exactly. This is like, now you're in, this is my wheelhouse, ugly people. But no, like you have those people. Yeah, I fucking lost my point. Shit.
Ugly people kill. And
yes. That is kind of true. Which is like, I mean, that's it. Which is that like, so if you think
Brad Pitt's going to go into a school with a popsicle, like, time to die.
Yeah, exactly. Of course not. Of course. But yeah, so if you have a bunch of people that are like, not have no prospects, right? Have like their best jobs are going to be like retail or food service or something like that. And they, the idea of being in a fucking spiritual war with like cosmological stakes where they can sort of fight evil or something like that, I mean, like, in other words, it's not just people being fooled into this stuff. It's that they're going to be more inclined to want to participate in that narrative than the narrative of like, oh, you just get to be a sad loser that never gets any pussy.
Well, it's a lot like Tom Hobbes said in his State of Nature.
He's Tommy Hobbes.
What Tommy Hobbes said is, we all start from something and we end at something else. I got nothing.
Give me 1 second. Should I get beer or coffee?
I mean, I'm about to wrap up. I'm done.
Either way. Okay.
Beer or coffee? I don't know. It's late.
Yeah, I guess.
But you can drink. You can drink coffee all night.
Yeah.
I would have a beer with you, I think, maybe.
Okay.
No, I don't
grab
have
a beer real quick?
Yeah, go for it. Well, wait, let's just wrap up. Okay. Let's just finish. We can talk about normal shit. Listen, thanks so much for listening, everybody. And thanks so much for Jered McCorkle for hitting me up to talk about guns. I
didn't even get into gun laws being racist. Oh, shit. Oh, that's
what could possibly be racist about gun laws?
Just their history.
The Black Panthers.
Yeah, exactly.
But, what are you going to do? I'm fucking tired, dude. These conversations with you are great, but I'm always like.
I had somebody tell me that once, that I'm exhausting. And not saying it in a
was it me 45 minutes ago?
No.
Said that.
Yeah, it was just your eyes that said that. Yeah.
Oh god. But you got anything going on? Just Comic Canon revival?
Yeah, just put into any like search bar for any like podcast listening program or whatever. Comic Canon revival, and you'll
talk about comic books. I was on an episode. Check it out.
That's right. Yeah,
I was funny. I think
you were funny. You were great.
I talked a lot. I listened.
That was the point. You were the guest.
I know, but you know how it is.
Yeah,
you feel kind of bad sometimes. All right, well, love you, buddy. Thanks for coming on.
Hell yeah, anytime. Thanks for letting me yell, rant about politics.